Hello, eighth graders. Um, Good morning. It is April 7th, 2021, and this is your language arts lesson. Um, the first thing that I want to do is reiterate that you are expected to read 15 minutes for class and fill out your R2S, and then read 20 minutes for your assignment. So it's really about 35 minutes that I'm expecting you to read, um, which is really, which is the norm. So, and very doable by all of you. So, um, I just wanted to reiterate that and make sure that you knew that that was what it was expected of you. The second thing that I want to point out is that you will see in ELA reading a question that I would like you to answer. And the question is, have you ever trusted somebody and later regretted it? And when you answer that question, I don't want you to name names, but I do want you to think about a time where somebody trusted somebody and shouldn't have. It could be an example that you have read in a book. It could be an example that actually happened to you, but we need to keep in mind that we don't need to be calling out anybody or making anybody feel bad with this assignment. The question is, have you ever trusted somebody when you shouldn't have? So, for example, I when I was in college, I let one of my friends borrow my notes for a class that they had missed, and they proceeded to lose my notes. Now, I should not have trusted them with my notes because I no longer had those notes. Thankfully, we did have another friend that was in the class and we were able to get the notes again. But we were smart about it and we all sat together. So the notes were never out of her sight. And the other friend could not lose them because we all sat at the library and did that. But that is an example of a time that I should not have trusted somebody. Um, and I did, and I regretted it. Um, but it wasn't something that, you know, is really a big deal now. Um, However long ago that was, however many years later, like, oh my gosh, 15 years later, it's a long time. Anyway, so that's the question that I want you to answer in ELA reading. But the big thing that I want you to focus on is ELA, is in writing. I want you to think about your career research paper or project that you did. You have received, oh dear, you have received a grade. You know what your grade is for that. You've gotten some comments from me. And now the last part of it is the reflection, which is a written argumentative text specifically addressing the project that you have submitted and how you feel about that project. So you know what your grade is because you've seen your grade, but that doesn't mean that you have to agree with me on what your grade is. But your job is to think about the process that we went through in doing the research, the process that we went through, that you went through in creating the slideshow or the piece of writing or whatever you did, and think about how you have grown as a writer, as a researcher, and as a presenter. Think about what you might do differently in the future. So this is what you do have access to this document, but your reflection is 150 to 400 word argumentative text specifically addressing your finished project. How satisfied are you with your finished project? So that might be, what would you do differently? What did you specifically like about your project and how it turned out? Was there anything you were specifically attached to? Is there any part that you're absolutely proud of in your presentation? How did your piece change over time? Did you envision one thing that became something else eventually? How have you grown, again, as a writer, a researcher, and a presenter? So how did doing this project help you become a better researcher? How did it help you become a better presenter? Whether it was an oral presentation or creating a presentation, PowerPoint, or a writer if you wrote a paper. So it might not be all of those things, but at least two of those things you should have grown in at least two of those things: researching and presenting, or researching and writing. And the other one, at least to a certain extent, you've gotten some experience with. So if you wrote your paper, you've grown as a writer, you've grown as a researcher, and you've probably learned something about being a presenter. If you did a presentation, you've grown as somebody who creates presentations, you've grown as a researcher, and you've probably learned something about being a writer and how to put those things together. And then the last thing you're talking about is, would this career be a good choice for you? That is the last thing that you are going to talk about. That is the conclusion of your argumentative text. So you're going to start with an introduction that introduces what your presentation was and why you chose that specific topic, why you chose that specific format, and those kinds of things. Again, you've covered those things before, so it doesn't need to be long. Your introduction should not be long. And then it should end with a thesis statement telling us how satisfied you were with it. So I am very satisfied with it. I am not satisfied with it. There are many things I wish I would do differently. There are a few things I wish I would have done differently, those kinds of things. Then your first paragraph after your thesis statement is going to be what you would do differently, what you specifically liked, those kinds of things. Your next paragraph would tell us how your piece changed and how you've grown as a writer, researcher, presenter. And then you're going to end with a conclusion about how this career specifically works or doesn't work for you. All right, so that is what you're doing. I will take specific questions that you have about the reflection when we meet at 2 o'clock today. And beyond that, I think that about 15 minutes working on this would be a good thing to aim for. 15 minutes of working on your reflection. There will be an assignment where you can create your document where you will type your reflection. It's not there yet, but there will be by the time you see this video. So, all right, I will take any questions that you have. I wanted to touch base with each of you just to make sure that you understand what you need to do and what questions you have and where you're going to go, what directions you're going to go with the argumentative text. You will have an opportunity, if you would like, to share what you have worked on with me, and I can look at it very briefly, not for a long time, but I can look at it very briefly and just kind of see if you're on the right track. So if you get some kind of start on your paper and at least have the document made, you're going to have a little bit of an opportunity to look at that with me when we meet at 2 o'clock today. All right, so I will see you at 2 o'clock. Bye.